I'll be honest, guys, I wasn't that excited for Mage Seeker. Oh, my camera's off. Yeah. So I was not that excited for Mage Seeker, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I've just discovered that we're getting a new Gareth Coker soundtrack out of it. And so that was a song in the pre-stream from that, which is very, very, very cool. Sorry, I knew it. I put the Discord on the wrong screen. Okay, anyway, welcome everybody to our patch 13.8 rundown. My name is Quintic. Today I'll be using my predictive criteria and intuition to tell you if these changes matter for amateur play. Remember that our default is no, they don't, but we'll still go over everything and we'll still contextualize all the changes so that you know if you need to make any major updates to your pools and if anything significant is going to change in our draft strategies. We have actually, finally, after struggling with ratios for so long, managed to figure out some criteria for assessing AD and AP ratio changes, as I've realized that, I was incorrectly comparing the values at, one item, where these ratio changes are really most going to be felt in snowball conditions and late-game conditions. So with an understanding of that, we're going to be able to better assess when ratio changes will have a significant impact on the champion. So I won't get stuff like Jarvan wrong again. So, which is really good. Guys, I spent a lot of time today. I went to visit my grandma. I took a lot of time outside. I've been, I had a bad start to the day. Things got all over the place, and I'm still working on that. So I'm going to try to keep today a little bit short and sweet. We're going to get in, we're going to do the patch, we're going to get out so I can go edit a video that I'm really, really, really excited to release, especially now that we have some Nico stuff to do. Because I want to deliver content to you guys, and I want to allocate my time correctly. So we'll speed through it a little bit, but we'll still be thorough, right? So I hope that is acceptable to you all. So we are going to start with immediately a change to Aurelion Sol. Oops, I have that. Okay, I should have checked everything. We have immediately an ASOL change, and I'm going to start updating now. Is there anything here? Okay, there's an old Fleet Conflict page. There we go. So, Aurelion Sol was last updated 2 patches ago. It was not that long ago. And that was his last damage change. Let me just go back and see what I did. On 13.5, I didn't think he lost 228 effective HP versus physicals at 16, which was a big deal. And then on 13.6... we've acknowledged that top-level Aurelion Sol counterplay is developing, but that we're still not punishing him well enough in the early game. He lost meaningful DPS, he lost meaningful CC, and Aurelion Sol, sure enough, stopped being overwhelming at top level. But we're not top level, and we're at a level where apparently he was still dominating even more than I thought, so they're hitting his durability. Excuse me for a moment, I'm just gonna adjust things here. Aurelion Sol. So we are going from 95 to 90 health per level. We're going from 4.3 to 4 armor per level. With a base of 22 and a base health of 620. So that is creating, actually I should swap this around so we can, at 16 he is losing yet another 200 EHP versus physicals. So now compounding with his 13.5 changes, that's minus 400 effective health versus physicals baseline. Remember, that's against 80 carries in the late game. That's against physical bruisers that, if he's getting in your face. That is a meaningful damage reduction for Aurelion Sol, right? It's going to be more difficult for him to fly multiple times throughout a fight. Exactly the same impact as on 13.5, except twice. With that in mind, with top-level counterplay developing in mind, I do kind of expect Aurelion Sol to be less overwhelming every time, although every time I say that, so far, he's retained some power level at our levels of play in, amateur level. like significantly sub-masters amateur is what I'm talking about specifically. So, again, this isn't the type of change that will remove all of Aurelion Sol's value. He still has like some outstanding control value, and most of the impact comes later, where he's harder to deal with anyway. So, weaker, pickable, kind of all we can say about that change, right? Ezreal is getting a very marginal base AD increase. This is the type of change where ordinarily we'd say DPS champion receiving DPS increase, and that's all well and good. But in Ezreal's case, this... actually, hold on. Let me make sure, because that's base, right? That's exclusively base. Base AD does impact Mystic Shots, which is pretty good. Base AD increases for Ezreal. Yeah, ordinarily, we would say base AD increases don't really matter, right? Base AD change, that's not. Let me start from the beginning, okay? Ezreal is receiving an increase to his base AD. Ordinarily, we would say DPS change to a DPS champion, therefore irrelevant for a change in pick conditions or in champion pool management. In Ezreal's case, sure, that has marginal implications for Divine Sunderer builds and Trinity builds. That has implications for poke damage, so this is actually in reality a poke champion receiving an increase to poke damage when he's played in his Essence Reaver style and he's not auto attacking properly. So like ultimately we would look at this and usually by our criteria not care. In Ezreal's case in particular, we'd say that's probably a small change that we should, maybe Ezreal's a little bit valuable, but nothing crazy, right? Garen is receiving the same. He's receiving 3 base AD, and he's receiving base armor. Again, we can actually classify Garen as a burst champion. I would like to see how his spin interacts with that. And I'll get to chat again in a moment. I am just trying to go a little bit faster than usual. Judgment is a spell. Actually, everything that Garen does scales off of total AD, not bonus AD. So that +3 increase per spin, definitely not too bad, right? Definitely not too bad. We'll check his armor increase as well. We are obligated to do so. Even though in this case, it's going to be like really, really, really minor. HP per level is 98. The base was 38. Actually, what was it? 36 to 38. And armor per level is 4.2. Swap it around. Okay, so Garen is receiving a completely irrelevant amount of armor. As we can see, at level 18, that translates to 47 effective HP against physicals. That's completely irrelevant. At level 1, that translates to 13, completely irrelevant. It does interact with armor penetration. That's important to note, but Garen is not usually going against champions that are going to be stacking lethality. It'll impact like a few matchups, maybe a little bit, right? So, consider it that way. I would argue this is like negligible. Garen players are talking about some Garen jungle stuff with these base AD changes. I'm not knowledgeable on that. I don't know how much of it is a meme. I don't know how much of it is just Garen players saying, hooray, I can play my champion when I got autofilled like a little bit more. But since it does impact his spin and base AD changes do impact jungle clears a lot, I will explore it. I cannot comment on it very much. Solo lane Garen is negligibly impacted. 69 base AD is nice. Being a rel enjoyer is very based. I do think that champion's pretty awesome right now, right? He loves picking Garen into 80 assassins mid just to not. Yeah, okay. So in that case, that'll actually improve those matchups like a little bit too. I think, for the record, I think Garen's good. I unironically do believe that Garen is a good champion. Like, not top tier by any means, but significantly more pickable than people think. I think he's genuinely good if you build your comp to accommodate a champion who contributes nothing but damage. And if he has a matchup where he just dumpsters everything, sure. Counterpick mid, immovable wall into assassins. Like mid lane, has a lot of unexplored counter picks right now. I mean, Cassante is coming up too, and it's really exciting, right? Speaking of Garen players, Karibo, what do you know about Garen jungle with these changes? Anything? We also like 69 base AD. Zeknil, for your question on Ezreal, sure, it buffs everything the same. It's neat. Okay, that's where we'll leave it. Okay, so buffing Janna is absolutely absurd. It was my opinion that between 12.10 and 13.1b, which is the change where the Grievous changes went through, Janna was just the best support in the game. She was a sleeper pick, but she was... and she was not favored by the meta, to be clear. But if the circumstances for Janna came out, she was the most disgusting, uber-broken pick in the world. Now, I did realize that, yes, Janna actually did fall in power, because one of the big things completely making her broken was the moment of her ultimate, which was absurdly overpowerful. And so making an 800 gold Oblivion Orb more effective into that did impact her. So I suppose she might have room for like a little bit of buffs, but she's still an outstanding champion, right? What she's getting is a shield decay timer change, which I think is fair and won't break us entirely. And we're getting a 10 damage increase plus a 10% AP increase. Fortunately for us, even though we would say, like, because this isn't really a poke champion receiving poke damage, this is just a sort of short trade thing. Fortunately for us, this isn't an increase to her shielding output. This isn't an increase to her cooldown, like, uptime. This isn't an increase to her, healing output. This isn't an increase to her roaming power. All of the things that are, like, truly, truly busted about Janna. And so this will be a very, very small change. We don't have to worry about Janna's Reign of Terror immediately coming back, right? So, negligible. Jarvan, a very strong champion right now. We have an AD growth change, so he's getting less damage throughout the game, and we are losing 10 base damage on our Q, which will slightly impact clear speeds, right? That will be likely to change very little. In that context, we can say DPS change to a DPS champion, and the AD growth change is probably not going to significantly impact clear times because we care more about base AD changes in that department. And so Jarvan is going to be slightly less powerful, but not significantly by any means, right? For how good Rakan is, you're surprised we haven't seen Janna. Well, you have to be very good on Janna to react to Rakan's engage, right? You can trade ult for ult if you really needed to. You would probably have to preemptively set up your tornado because Rakan has to be interrupted before he finishes his dash, otherwise it goes off. I think Rakan is a little too slippery to be completely destroyed consistently by Janna. If you are perfect at the matchup, then yes, it's really damaging. In the first rotation of combat, I don't think it's completely invalidating. I think Janna is so much better into the more orthodox engaged champions. Right. Yeah, oh no, Jarvan lost 6 point... Yeah, there's the actual number. Thank you, Zeknil, for doing the math that I was too lazy to do. He lost 6.8 AD at level 18, and he lost 10 damage off his Q. Do you guys honestly think that's going to change the power of this champion? No. Exactly. It's not. It was a rhetorical question. I promise I wasn't seriously considering if this would change them. It was... Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about the interactions paradox, if I'm being honest. It's just the way that matchup would appear to go in the mid-game implies to me that both champions have options. Rakan would be... If Rakan is capable of playing for surprise, then he can win. If he's too honest, then Janna can win. Right. Let's find out. To my knowledge, no. To my knowledge, nothing total AD. Unless, maybe Q is. Maybe Q is, actually. Where's Jay Forvin? Here he is. Bonus, bonus, bonus. Nope. No total ratios. So, Negligible. Not doing anything. Kayn. Shadow Assassin Kayn is above many junglers in terms of win rate and ban rate, especially in eastern regions. Well, that would explain why I haven't seen him very much. Also, I think the champions that I play just perform well into him, so I didn't really know. Wow, that's kind of a lot, isn't it? What is he being nerfed for? What level? That's elite play, so that's high elo solo queue. Wow. I gotta say, like, this is a spell that we would desire to have almost 100% uptime on, so Shadow Assassin Kayn can achieve some kind of poke fantasy. So that he is more capable of hiding in your walls, like hitting W's, whittling you down, playing off his team like that until he can one-shot you. The movement speed and the cooldown here is also what helps him to terrorize the map and makes him a macro menace on top of all of that. Those are changes that do matter for Shadow Assassin Kayn, right? Excuse me. Probably a Chinese champ. Yeah, and like... Excuse me. That makes sense. I mean, when people are just mechanically better and like... I guess he's just doing... he's just fighting a lot, isn't he? Games are a bit faster in China, especially. So I don't have any criteria to assess movement speed. I do have criteria for cooldowns, and Kayn is definitely hitting something, because it's like, so we can consider this adjacent to a poke spell. We can consider this a core personal defense. We can consider this almost in combat spammable mobility. It's not at our 6-second window. It is a spell with ideal 100% uptime, so that is power impacting. That does suck for Shadow Assassin Kayn. In amateur play, like, because if he's dominating solo queue off just the macro threat he exerts from this, that's also his greatest strength in coordinated play too, just being able to accelerate himself like that. I don't think Rost is particularly ridiculous. My own perspective on Kayn is not particularly positive in coordinated play, but I believe that might be a holdover from when I was like purely theory focused. So what I would assume that this does make him weaker. The criteria does say that this sucks for Kayn. My knowledge of Kayn says that this does suck for Kayn. But to what degree it sucks, I don't know. It's up to the Kayn players to really assess whether they believe that this harms their champion too much. I mean, if you're truly a Kayn main, you're not going to remove Kayn from your pool over this, right? It's just if Kayn is a supplement in your pool, yeah, probably not as effective. So, chat, Paradox, you think it's a nerf to, like, poke Blue Kayn? Generic Blue Kayn, not really. Well, generic Blue Kayn... Actually, that's another good point, though. That's another good point. I'm thinking of Blue Kayn when he's not absurdly snowballed, when he's on pace with the rest of the game. That kind of poke style is, like, one of his core strengths. If he is snowballed, we're not going to care, because his damage is excessive. That's a good point. Thank you for reminding me of that. So it is... Kayn is weaker, but snowballed Kayn is not meaningfully enough weaker for this to matter. It's just Kayn from an even position. So now that you've reminded me of that, thank you, I would then argue instead that this is a, like, skill issue change where you just have to be picking Kayn in positions where he's more likely to snowball, or you have to be better at snowballing on him to find the more consistent value. So, skill issue, right? Pro play when Canyon played him, he spammed W out of vision, tried to poke squishy champs. Yeah. That's the style. That's what I love about Blue Kayn. That's why I'm super happy he's in the game, because I think junglers need poke styles like that. Or a lot of junglers would love poke styles like that. Like that, because the big problem is, like, the only real poke junglers that there are, Nidalee who is volatile as hell, Kane, who is volatile as hell, and Maokai, who keeps having to be nerfed whenever his poke is, like, actually good. Which is why I wish Ziggs Jungle came out. It almost worked. It was about to work if preseason released just a little differently, and then they changed the pets, and it stopped working. But Zeknel, thank you so much for the Twitch Prime. Really appreciate it. Welcome back to Quinnicket. So I think we can conclude together that this hurts theoretically optimal Kane. This hurts theoretically stable Kane, but in lower elo conditions where he's snowballed properly, or in conditions where you are just an exceptionally good Kane who is fighting like regular all-ins rather than just playing for poke, in those circumstances, these changes wouldn't be like too bad. But because it impacts theory, I would assess it to be a bit of a problem where some Kane players who are less comfortable on him and just using him as a supplement in their pools might want to consider shifting things around a little bit. Zed Jungle spoke. True. Actually, that's kind of fun. I failed to check when Kane was last updated. Forgive me. It was 12/23. He hasn't been seen in a while. So, Kha'Zix got his changes last patch that I predicted would kind of be, just fine quality of life for Kha'Zix, wouldn't really create any more pick conditions. And they said that they were, in fact, pretty light. Now, what they're giving him in exchange is plus 10 damage on his Q. And so that is a outside of threshold change to a burst champion. We can consider some Bruiser Kha'Zix DPS sort of things. And in that context, it's plus 10 damage per 2 seconds, which eventually with haste, because if we get up to 100 haste, 50% cooldown reduction, that is a plus 10 DPS change. Even that just ultimately boils down to a DPS change to a DPS champion within that context. So in burst context, like, this isn't creating any Kha'Zix pick conditions either. Still, if you're a Kha'Zix player, you'll look at that and say, nice, sure, I get some damage. Hi, Garth, good to see you. Very happy you're here. Memes and stuff. I knew I was forgetting someone. Thank you. Shyvana is a decent poke champion. You're correct. I just wish there were more orthodox poke options for junglers, and I wish there was, like, a physical option. Like, I wish Jace Jungle worked. I wish this was Wild Rift, because Jace Jungle is actually insane in Wild Rift, I've heard. Yeah, but Shyvana fits into Siege pretty well. You're right. Okay, Kog'Maw is getting a set of changes. Now, immediately, well, first of all, when was Kog'Maw changed last? I have to know. Kog'Maw was changed last on 12/11 when he was hotfixed off the durability update. And that's because he was nerfed on the patch. I wasn't keeping track of his previous. Yeah, okay. And it left Cog in a spot, like Kog'Maw's good damage-wise. He's genuinely better than a lot of people think, but he just takes so much to actually defend. He takes, like, specific contexts to really find his perfect value. So that's why he feels like he's more situational than other hyper carries, right? So what does he get? Oh boy, a passive buff. Something that we should never be using properly, but alright. He's ghosted. Cool. That's a necessary change. That should have been in the game anyway. Right. The mana cost early on Void Ooze is going down, and the slow early is going up. So this is a buff to Marksman Kog'Maw more than AP Kog'Maw, because this is your first max spell in that context, and it's not really changing in any meaningful way for you if you're maxing this. So it's just greater access to Kog'Maw's slow, which actually does make it easier for him to defend himself, makes it easier to play off his range. I think this does matter. I think this is meaningfully power impacting for Kog'Maw. Caustic Spittle going from 8 to 7 seconds. This doesn't hit the types of spells where cooldown changes like really matter. And so we've kind of just labeled it a DPS increase to a DPS champ, and it's a nice thing to have. So really, it's if you believe that this slow increase, the 10% slow increase for early game or for Kog'Maw 80 carry, matters for his self-heal and makes it easier for him to exist, then he is far better than before, especially in the tank-heavy games where his niche can really excel, right? Because Kog'Maw, a big chunk of Kog'Maw's value is his percent HP damage. And if you're not getting value out of his percent HP damage, then it is easier to find value from Jinx or from Aphelios or from Varus or other hypercarries, right? Well, the key to me is that Kog'Maw is not truly like an anti-dive anchor. He actually dies a lot to that and like really needs defense for that. It's just if your front line is too heavy or if you need a magical hyper carry for damage spread purposes, that's when Kog'Maw really stands out, right? Cogmelio is, yeah, I mean, I guess Melio actually does have the coverage that Kog'Maw could need sometimes. So, yep. I would imagine that this is better for him, but as I overshot the Vayne changes last patch and kind of said, like, this is where it would matter if it does matter, and then it didn't end up mattering, just take that with a bit of a grain of salt. I think Kog'Maw will be stronger, but to what degree, if he's stronger enough to change pick conditions, that will require more practical testing. Leona, very bad champion right now. Almost entirely killed by the durability update, frankly. Still valuable in sub-masters amateur play. Still valuable, because she's still simple and she still does her job as advertised, right? She's still fine. But the big problem is that she's extremely committal and then lost all of her damage in the durability update. So she's not doing enough damage to justify her immediate engage. And then what that does when you have a situation like that, it's why Rel was so bad for so long. You're telling your teammates, follow up immediately with enough damage to finish off this target or I will die. And my CC will amount to nothing. Now, the alternative thing that you can do in a situation like that, if you don't have enough damage to back up your engage, you can also just have enough raw survivability to continue outputting CC. And that's actually why Rel started to become reasonable, because she doesn't die immediately and because she does have her own source of healing. And because she does have a Wombo niche, right? So it seems like what they're trying to do is actually up Leona's resistances to make it easier for her to survive in the fray. This 10 damage, completely irrelevant. This is not anything. So we need to ask ourselves, does this plus 5 armor and plus 5 resistance increase matter enough for Leona to justify her existence? Let me double check what Braum got. I think Braum was 10 to 20, something like that. Yeah, so you have to realize Braum received plus 10, which is actually really significant, and he's a significantly less committal champion offensively. So what I'm seeing from these Leona changes is a small increase that will be nice and appealing for her, but not enough of an increase to kind of get her out of jail where she's just strictly worse than Nautilus or Amumu or, you know, other engaged supports that either offer more damage or more, you know, just a greater moment of CC or something like that, right? I just think she's not tanky enough and doesn't do enough damage, and they slightly address those, but probably not to enough of an extent, right? That said, if you're playing Leona in amateur, she's going to be fine, and you don't care, right? Bring back my stone plate for a support item. I miss it! It was so good. Yeah. Yeah, Nautilus just has his value. I mean, you and I, especially Paradox, we know the Nautilus conditions, like where not even Nautilus jungle would feel appealing, where Nautilus's ultimate is just better than what other engaged supports offer, right? Leona doesn't have that niche. She's very pure, she's very honest, she's very direct, and numerically she's very weak. Lilia, a champion that I would really, really love to be playing right now, but unfortunately, my team needs me to have a different skill set. So, I'm like perpetually out of the loop on Lilia. Like, when was her last change? Because we've talked about her recently. We've talked about Lilia like kind of recently. She got a change on 13.1b. I'm just trying to remind myself what that was right now. She received some passive buffs that were fully offset by Demonic Embrace nerfs. Oh, and that's right. And she just literally was not dealing enough damage to justify her Liandry's builds. And she was pretty much fully abusing Demonic Embrace plus tank builds for value, and she was existing in a meta where power farming was really, really devalued, except she's a pure tempo champion, so when power farming is devalued, that kind of sucks. When having a tempo advantage on your opponent and denying camps is devalued, that really sucks. So Lilia did get a little bit empowered by the changes to enemy jungle camps, where like the damage penalty to hitting them is kind of gone. She did get slightly empowered by that, I suppose. Let's see what the actual what she is actually receiving. She is receiving, okay, she is now allowed to deal 20 more damage to monsters through passive early, which is kind of a big deal. Up to 40% more damage at level 1 against monsters. All single target camps hit the new max HP cap. Her clear speed is impacted. Pure tempo jungler. So that's power impacting. That's valuable. That's good. That being said, remember, clear speed doesn't really matter at like platinum and below. And tempo junglers are kind of hard to execute at that level of play. So, I mean, theoretical Lilia is faster and better at achieving her game plan. And we'll have to kind of wait and see if that trickles down to lower levels of play. Healing against monsters, that's kind of a big deal. That makes her harder. Oh my gosh, the AP ratio up dramatically. And healing against champions, nerfed base, but up 12% AP. So really trying to pushing her into pure damage-oriented builds. Since the passive ratio didn't go up, like it's really just her healing, which is important, which is valuable. It says build more damage and you will get more durability. These are nice changes to Lilia. I personally am not qualified enough to tell you at our level of play whether that makes Lilia more appealing, but I would suspect that Lilia is back on people's radars a little bit at top level, at least investigating whether she's worth playing again. Right? Lilia support. I'm sorry I couldn't be more helpful in this one. We'll wait and see, and I'll update you guys in the comments under this video. Oh, thank God. Well, guys, who could have predicted that increasing all of Malphite's ratios over a course of multiple patches would eventually make people realize that he's absolutely giga-broken? Yeah. I'm sorry. I was supposed to. So I think Paradox asked about Nico. I think we'll talk about Nico very briefly. At the end of this stream. Okay, let's see exactly. Like, did this undo Malphite? What did this undo for Malphite? Okay, so Malphite. Oh, sorry, that was this change. They increased the attack armor ratio by 5%. They increased the cleave armor ratio by 5%. And they decreased the cooldown, which is a big, big, big deal and made WMAX a lot more appealing. Without rolling back the cooldown, I find it hard to believe that all of Malphite's combat power is going to be gone. We actually can just say, like, okay, so each attack is worth 20 less. That is a pretty meaningful DPS reduction. Excuse me for the hiccups. That is a pretty meaningful DPS reduction. Reducing the cleave by 5% armor does impact his wave clear. Like, this does matter, right? This really does matter. However, it hasn't rolled back the cooldown. It hasn't rolled back all of the incentives for pure WMAX. And, like, let's look at the rest of the context of Malphite, right? Here, you know, because we've been over this in a previous video. When he got these 13-4 changes, I was saying, like, wow, look at all these previous buffs. Oh my goodness, E, ground slam, armor increased, base damage increased. Wow, mana cost no longer increases with ranks. Wow, he got, like, I mean, that's a nothing change. His AP ratios went up. This doesn't really matter, but it's something. Wow, Granite Shield cooldown, actually a really big deal. Wow, Thunderclap cooldown now decreases with ranks. Wow, 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 wow. Like, Malphite's still in a position where he's not locked into Q max jail, right? Where he's not forced to max Q, which actually does make him a weaker champion overall when he's forced to do that. I think this will hit Malphite's power. It will reduce his ability to just clap everybody in lane, and it will like make him a little more exposed to his counter picks again, which is good and necessary. However, look at yourself, honestly. Look at yourself in the mirror, right? You are a sub-masters amateur player. Are you really telling me you're good enough to like just deal with the Malphite? You can put him down like 40 CS, doesn't matter. He finds one ultimate, you misplay. We're not good at the game, right? So, I mean, now that Malphite does have lanes that he can lose, because this, I do think, even though we would ordinarily say, haha, DPS nerf to a DPS champ, I do think this does matter for extended trades. Even though he does have a few more lanes he can lose, I really don't think he's going to be like dramatically impacted in power, right? Put me on Bard, coach. Yes, sir. He has the button. He still has much better trading power than before. He still has incentives max W. He still beats a lot of DPS champions. He still has like short cooldown W, repeated trades like this. He's still an outstanding champion. Because remember, the last buff was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Malphite has been insane for a long, long, long time. Partially rolling back some of that will not remove him from being like an outstanding champion. It'll just make him more fair in lane. I'm not even going to talk about this one. Can we skip this one? Like, okay, I will say that +4 armor in early skirmishes is a real thing that does matter, especially on a champion whose game plan is fundamentally built around taking invades and taking duels. That will matter. It's just, it's going to be such a small change that's really, it's not worth going in depth at all. Let's talk about Panth instead of Nidalee. Panth is cool. Panth's a cool champ. I'm actually about to do a Pantheon study with a Pantheon player, so I'll have a more developed opinion on him later. Oh, it's Nidalee top builds. Oh. Oh. So, Poppy has seen better days and she hasn't excelled in any of her roles for a while. You mean the champion who's deliberately supposed to be niche isn't, like, fully excelling all the time? Wow! Okay, to my knowledge, that Q applies twice, right? Let me just refresh myself on how exactly Hammer Shock works. Ruptures to deal the same physical damage. Okay. I mean, so... Whoops. Hammer Shock's cooldown gets ridiculously low, which, in essence will transform... Like, we can approximate this as a +1% max health DPS buff. It's not exactly that. It does apply twice, so it kind of leans more into the DPS. The cooldown, like, trivially gets to, like, 3 seconds. So it is roughly that, and that is a very meaningful damage increase to a DPS champion. Like, when we have percent health damage and we see 1% max health DPS, we do care. It is a little bit power impacting, right? Plus 2% bonus resistances, doubled to 24. I mean, all of this really just looks like top lane Poppy buffs, if I'm being honest. Like, if you find a good Poppy angle and Poppy's in your pool already, then you are doing more and your lane phase is easier to play. Not going to make her broken enough to just add to a pool that she's not in, though. So, and like, maybe this will impact her clear, and maybe Poppy jungle will be... I would love to be playing Poppy jungle, if I'm being honest. But can't really say more than expected QOL, right? Thought she's supposed to be a generically good tank who excels in anti-mobility situations. Well, I mean... Poppy, it is more complex for her to find her actually damning CC. I mean, she's a damage champion, let's be clear. She's one of those damage tanks like Shen, where her skirmishing power is a lot of her threats. Her CC is much more conditional than Shen's. Ultimately, that can't hold a candle to Wardens that just have CC on demand and more universal protection, right? That can't compare against Vanguards. Like, Jungle Poppy is the most generically good role for her, just because she is more likely to find flanks, and she is more likely to be in a position where her ultimate is, like, super high value. But I mean, I would not by any means call Poppy a generic champion. That's my perspective on her. Okay, we'll calculate the change on Rakan. Whoops, I'm moving the wrong thing around. We'll calculate the Rakan change. It's all armor changes. Okay, so we have HP 610, 610, HP per level 99, 99. We have a change 32 to 30. And then we have a change 5.1 to 4.9. We're going to swap this around. F of X minus G of X, because it's a nerf, not a buff. Okay, Rakan is at level 1 losing practically nothing. It's 12 EHP versus physicals. At 6, he's losing 30. That is still outside of our burst threshold changes where we care. At 16, which is a little unrealistic, he's losing only 100. At like 13, which is a lot more. You know, 60-ish at 11 to 75 at 13 starts to matter for sure. Losing 124 is nothing to sneeze at, but we're not really expecting to get to that point. So when Rakan is healing you for 13 more billion HP in lane, and his cooldowns are unimpacted and stuff like that, like, I think there's still enough base power in this champion's kit, to justify him. I mean, especially when an item that he actually enjoys is getting some changes in a way that he might enjoy. That remains to be seen. Yeah. The original Q buffs are fine. You should be forced to put like 3 to 5 points, so level 1 Q isn't nearly as OP. Yeah. Seems like it doesn't matter. You are correct, Zeknal. This doesn't matter. Actually, after all, like, practically no changes in this entire patch for champions actually matter. The criteria says none of this is significantly impactful. Aurelion Soul, that's major, but can be offset by playing around it differently. Kayn is major, except in the levels of play that we're at. Kog'Maw might be major. I really do think Kog'Maw is potentially the most impactful change of the patch, and we'll have to look at Lilia, but, like, really none of this did anything. So, let's talk about a change that does matter. Cosmic Drive. Because, remember, systemic changes are the biggest catalysts to change. Systemic changes matter the most. They have the most sweeping impacts. They do impact more around the game. And Cosmic Drive is becoming much, 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 much more usable. Now, base AP goes to 100. So think about what this is right now. This is a 100 AP, 30 haste item, which usually had a passive that doesn't really matter. Cosmic before said once you hit 3 spells, now you have plus 40 AP for a total of 130. You gained some movement speed, but then it came at a time when, you know, you'd already just spent your cooldowns on a lot of champions. And sure, you're getting more cooldowns back. It's supposed to be for your second rotation, but it was still awkward, right? It was still really awkward. So now, damaging a champion, excluding damage over time, generates a stack of 2.5 movement speed every 1.5 seconds for the next 5 seconds, up to 4 stacks. At 4 stacks, gain an additional 10% movement speed. Dealing damage refreshes. So you will gain a total of 20% movement speed. It works like Grasp. You will need to hit them twice, right? One spell can't fully stack the passive, as they're saying. It is Grasp. If you've used Grasp, it stacks like Grasp. This is really, 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 really good. Now, let me contextualize this for you, too. I see some people calling out some useful stuff in chat, but like calm down like a little bit, because like, what is this? Last time this item received a change, we identified that it was pretty much like the dream utility item. It was a tremendous stat stick, right? It was an item that provided virtually no useful passive and just really good stats. And those stats were most useful on utility champions because those were the champions who would most value raw 30 haste over something like penetration. If that's who it would beat, that's who it would beat. On those champions, it would beat an option like Shadow Flame or like Early Void Staff or like Death Cap or something. I mean, it really was a Death Cap competitor. It really was, but it was a lower immediate damage. Cosmic Drive is really, really, really cemented now as a DPS item. It is a DPS item for sure. It is the primary magical DPS item, Nashor's Tooth aside. So if you are not an auto attacker, not a Nashor's user, and you are a DPS mage, this is for you. It's still quite good on our utility champs that we were talking about, Seraphine, like just because it's a stat stick for them. But so something like Cassiopeia comes to mind. Not because Cassiopeia particularly values the haste, but because Cassiopeia absolutely values this movement speed. This is super good for Cassiopeia. Who else would it be good on? There is potential for it on Ziggs, although he's not like the user that I would most get excited about. It says excluding damage over time, so we're going to have to figure out how it works on Singed, because Singed would love this if he could find a way to make it work. It is a 3,000 gold item. Silas loves this. Again, he's a DPS champion. This would be super good for him, right? So who have we mentioned here? We said control mages like this, a super nice Orianna item, a Victor item. Okay, see, so my only problem with those champions is like, it does have to win against pen items. So I'm thinking of this as second item primarily, and it would probably lose the Shadow Flame argument on champions like that, on Orianna Victor. And then we have to compare it on third, Shadow Flame, and it might lose the Seraph's argument there too. And then we would have to compare it against Void, and if we're on a Seraph's involved build path, then Void like almost certainly wins. That said, I think Cosmic Drive with this movement speed, I think it starts to become really valuable late build on probably most mages. It has to compete against Death Cap, so it's like if you're primarily playing for Burst, Death Cap probably wins. If this movement speed would work on you because you are getting more involved in combat, then I think Cosmic Drive probably wins. We have mentioned Gwen. I think it actually sounds pretty outstanding on Gwen too. That sounds excellent. Like, it would solve stickiness issues on Gwen. I really do like the sounds of that. Good on Alistar. Okay, Declo. Unironically, yes, you are correct. You are right. It is good on Alistar because he's a utility champion who would value the haste there. I'm still going to be building this like all the time on Ivern. Not because the passive is like the passive is better. Mainly just because the stat stick is too overwhelming for that champion, right? Jack's item, it's kind of cool. Yeah, and Zeknal saying that it is pretty much the Black Cleaver for mages, in the sense that it is just a raw stat stick, and when those stats are valuable, that's great. That is correct. Now, Cosmic Drive does have fewer passives than Cleaver, and fewer, overwhelming effects than Cleaver, but it does follow the same line of reasoning. Let's actually look at champions, shall we? We did mention Singed, if we were capable of stacking it, because remember, we also have to look at this clause here, right? Excluding damage over time. What does that mean? Does it mean that Singed stacks it as though he stacks Conqueror? All right, let's look for champions who would value this. Ahri would not value it early, but might value it late. Ahri would value it maybe on 4th. Or something like that. Annie could actually find some value out of it when she's not playing for her raw burst builds, when she's playing for more of a Roa style build, when she's playing more for her utility. Asol doesn't value haste at all, and so he doesn't care about this. All right, who would value the movement speed? We've mentioned Cassiopeia already. There might be some quirky value if he doesn't desperately need the pen. Right. We're looking at some assassins right here who absolutely would not be purchasing this. Fizz still theoretically one of the best Fizz items for pseudo tank Fizz. I don't know if this change brings that out yet. Like, I don't think it does just yet. Maybe we get tricky. Every single change we get to this item makes it closer, right? Not Fiddle. Not Fiddle. Fiddlesticks needs his moment of his ultimate to hurt. He doesn't need more ultimates. Mord might want it late. Yeah, I could totally see Mordekaiser in, like, I can totally see Mordekaiser liking it pre-pivot, like before he has to pivot into defensive items. Or like as the last item before his pivot. We mentioned Jax. Like, start to look at melees, start to look at AP bruisers, who are really, really going to be the champions who value this a lot. Karthus can find value out of this, but again, it has to win on comparisons against Deathcap, against Void, against Shadowflame. That's a tall order for this champion in particular. I think it would be an outstanding final item on Karthus if you get late into your build. Well, we say Rylai's is more effective on Mord, but we're not saying that Cosmic Drive needs to be rushed, right? What would that build entail? What would that Mordekaiser build look like? That Mordekaiser build, like the heavy AP version, could maybe look something like Rylai's Riftmaker, Cosmic Drive into defenses. Or it could even look like Rylai's Cosmic Drive Jack Show. It could look like that, maybe, right? Would Eve want this? Extremely doubtful. I know she already overkills, but what would the movement speed do for her? What would the haste do for her? Like, it would like reduce. It would open more windows for her ultimate, right? But like early in the build, no. So basically, what we can conclude looking at champions. Actually, we'll keep looking at champions for a little bit. Lissandra would probably struggle to find this in her build early. Morgana could actually find some value if it's just raw utility. Nico could find some value for raw utility, but she's giving up damage. Nidalee, a lot of these champions could find value for raw utility at the cost of damage, which is a meaningful cost, right? Ryze, a DPS champion, loves this. He would really, really love this. Kayle would love this, right? A pure DPS champions. Yeah, keep looking for DPS champions, right? Diana, it would have to be DPS Diana, not the burst builds. But on DPS Diana, I think I would agree with you. Yep. Swain can find value in this in the right circumstances. Talia is a DPS champion, so Talia could find value in this, right? Lichbane Cosmic. Oh, of course, my bad. I forgot about Sona. Unironically, it could be okay on Sona as long as you don't encounter mana issues for having it, right? Hailfire in my DMs has actually mentioned Udyr. If you can sacrifice the durability for it, then yes. Would the multi-hit Q on Talia fully stack it? I don't know, but Talia's Q cooldown is low enough that she would absolutely be able to maintain it. We mentioned Varus. That sounds pretty reasonable to me. AP Varus would not mind having this, especially since he is fully limited by his ultimate cooldown. And now having access to Nashers with haste and Cosmic Drive with haste, which is reasonably close enough to Deathcap. Not bad. AP Varus does not magic... Yeah. AP Varus doesn't need magic penetration. AP Varus just kills you. So it would be good. They would be quite good on him, right? I would stay away from it on Veigar until maybe the end of your build. Vex 2, LeBlanc 2, stay away from it until, like, end build, right? So, I mean, the conclusions are clear. Now that we've, like, kind of looked at everyone and kind of gotten a feel for who would enjoy this new movement speed version of the item. Okay, so utility champions still like it for the stat stick purpose. DPS champions who don't need to compete against penetration would really enjoy having this stat stick, especially now that the passive is something that they can use. Melee AP bruisers really like this because those are more likely to be DPS champions too, right? And then we have some stragglers like Varus who doesn't value pen and stuff like that, for whom this item is actually quite outstanding. But that's assuming that we're talking about this item on second or third item or something like that. The conclusion we can also draw is at the end of the game, when you have purchased everything that matters, when you're like an Orthodox Burst Mage, like, and you have your Mythic Seraph's Void, or you're not a Seraph's champion, you have Mythic Shadowflame Void, and like your Sorks, and now it's like, okay, do I build Deathcap? Do I build Cosmic or something? Like, you can fit this into the end of your build on pretty much every mage. I And that's also a good call out, that this could, in theory, be a boot replacement item. But remember that the boots that it's replacing are probably Sork shoes, and Sork shoes are pretty outstanding in terms of damage. So we'll consider that. TLDR, Cosmic Drive is really usable now. It has a passive that actually makes sense and works for a lot of champions, and then it becomes a very good stat stick in that context. And some champions will value it on 2. A few champions will value it on first item. And most AP champions will value it at least as an option at the very, 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 very end of your build. At the very end. Just be mindful that you're not over purchasing it. I see LeBlanc players building this, and they should stop, because like LeBlanc Cosmic on 2, I get that you're a poke champion, but your poke needs to hurt because it's a combo. Like it can't. You can't do it. Stop it. This is an excellent item. I'm really happy to see it. In terms of implication for your pools and amateur play, I mean, like, if you have some top lane bruisers that you love playing, like Gwen in particular, right? Who have kind of like shifted out of your pool, and you're like, and you need something fun and exciting that you used to love, that you want to bring back, like, by all means, if this is your catalyst for doing that, be my guest. I right now cannot foresee any single champion that will become overpowered off this change. Do look at Cassio and Rise again. Yeah, okay, so yeah, but you would make changes to your pool mainly because something you used to play sounds much stronger now that this version of Cosmic is in the game. That is the only reason you would make a change to your pool off this patch. Mid Silas is a DPS champion. Mid Silas has a lot more durability. Mid Silas loves playing with his teammates. He loves weaving in and out of a fight. He loves actually providing utility to his teammates and just being, like a good partner. He's absolutely a DPS champion who likes Cosmic Drive. The only reason Jungle Silas and Support Silas have to itemize to one-shot you is just because on lower income, they really can't get both enough durability and enough damage to justify themselves, and so they have to go all in on killing you. But when Silas is a solo laner, Cosmic Drive is like his best friend. It's really good. And yeah, I do think the 18 pen is worth more than the 100 AP and 30 haste, because you will have Void at that point, and then 18 flat penetration after the percent penetration from Void Staff. Like, that is a big deal in terms of your damage on a burst champion, right? So that's all of the changes in the patch. And it is minor, right? It is very, very minor. All of our criteria says most of this doesn't matter, and the stuff that does matter is either like only potentially useful at top level and not for us, or it remains to be seen, or like, yeah, there's just not a lot that really, really, really matters, right? But that said, cool, awesome Cosmic Drive change. So, yeah. Not a particularly exciting patch, if I'm being honest. Which is good. Sometimes we need periods of stability, which periods of stability allow us to learn the game more deeply, rather than adapting to new things and having our champions adjusted and relearning like our champions and how they work. So it's nice to have a period of stability. Please develop your learning objectives. Please work on your goals. This is a good time. Not much is happening. Okay, you guys want to talk about Nico? Yes, if you're already an Ionians abuser, by all means replace them with Cosmic Drive. Okay. Let's take a moment to talk about Nico. So, for everybody in chat, we will be having one Nico in-house. A single Nico in-house. We will be testing her out. We will be taking a look, and I'm going to release a micro day one. I'm going to try to find a new format that lets me do it a little bit faster and a little bit less in-depth. Because I think for mid-scopes, it's appropriate to have a short conversation about them. New Nico looks quite good for certain purposes, but it's a little bit... Let me just show you guys. Was it you who posted the Nico stuff? No, it was Phlox. Okay, so these are the Nico changes. Basically, by the looks of it, their intention is to create fun. Their intention is to create options and fun for Nico players. Nico, historically, has not been a super competitively viable champion. Nico's been a champion, like, she's had builds where she becomes, like, prominent, but, like, her identity is fundamentally weird, right? She's at least in mid lane, her primary role, a big lane bully who transitions into a weird defensive peel role, like, almost like an Alawi style champion, which is strange, right? And then there's also support Nico, which I think is a genuinely outstanding catcher. For the record, I think support Nico is actually her best role and is very good. And then, people have been playing top lane Nico, which has historically been kind of a Kennen substitute and has had value. People have played AD carry Nico, like either on marksman builds or mage builds. Like, Nico just appears all over the place because people like to play Nico, but her niche is weird. So what did they do about that, right? So her passive... you're allowed to become anything. That's the first thing they teased, and becoming anything is pretty intuitive, and you don't break on just taking damage. You only break when the disguise self dies or when you're CC'd. You're allowed to maintain your disguise a little bit longer, so there's more opportunities for fooling people and for actually using deception, right? And I've seen I've actually been playing around a little bit just for fun. I haven't tried to fool anyone yet, but you can become a caster minion and walk into lane alongside the minions. If somebody doesn't notice that there's an extra caster minion, that's entirely on them, but it is a funny possibility, right? So the pop damage, the base is going down like a little bit. She's losing 10 damage and gaining a ratio, which ultimately is not going to change her niche a little more. But, oh, that's a big number. That's a big monster damage number, right? 70 bonus damage to monsters. Oh, what's that times 3, guys? Oh, yeah, 210 bonus damage to monsters in a single Q cast. That's on a 7-second cooldown. Huh, that's actually within our threshold of a mage jungler, like mage jungler's cooldown. That's pretty good. W, Nico can reactivate to set, so Nico can fully micro her clone. I will show you how this looks once we get onto PBE. She can fully micro her clone, which is crazy. And since they haven't mentioned anything about its hitbox disappearing, that's insanity for actually being able to block skill shots. So really good Nico players will use this for crazy scouting, crazy blocks. Like, it's going to be so good. Oh, her empowered attacks deal 50 bonus damage to monsters. Well, Nico players already play her in 4 roles anyway. Let's add the 5th. Zeknel, yes, I have cleared in 313 on this champion. 313 full clear. Now, she's losing another 10 damage here, plus ratio here. Is that really going to matter for her lethal windows losing 20 damage total? We would consider that like patch changes, nerfs. No, it won't at all. Pop Blossom. After Channel, Nico jumps into the air, suspending all nearby enemies. Then she crashes to the ground, deal damage to everyone, stun lingers, but it no longer shields her. The damage is lower and the cooldown is higher. Okay, that doesn't sound particularly amazing, but let me demonstrate to you, like, what this actually means. I'm going to log in. That does sound kind of bad, doesn't it? Like, and I thought when I heard that at first, like, that doesn't sound amazing, right? That doesn't sound super, super, super exciting. Probably not great. But, like, you have to see it in action literally once to realize that this is actually better. One time. Well, better on paper. Look, minus 50 damage is a big deal. Minus 100 damage at max rank is a big deal. It is. Nico's one combo solo kill potential is down, but she's already such an egregious bully when you're playing her properly in mid lane that, maybe it doesn't matter. I would actually kind of expect that her best role is support after this, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's probably likely that she's a primary support, although she's not going to become incapable of playing mid, especially at lower elos. Actually, I would like to look at more of their context. Big project. The changes were intended to preserve current playstyles. You can play attack speed, you can play mage, you can play tank, heighten trickster gameplay, add a little spice. Jungle changes are a bonus. But jungle sounds exciting. I agree, because I'm a jungle player now, so I want to play Nico. I want to play Nico really badly. Give me my mage junglers. Give them to me. I want to play her. Woo! And Scuttle spawns at 3:30, so Nico is, 17 seconds faster than the Scuttle spawn. Okay, let's go here. Let's boot her out. So, chat, what are your initial impressions of Nico not having a shield anymore and having lower damage on her R? Like, what would you think immediately? Because it doesn't sound particularly amazing, right? It does sound like a pretty big power loss. It does. But why would they have to remove that power? Why would they have to remove that power, right? Huh. Let me show you. Okay, well, I gotta get rid of this now. We're waiting for this to load. I should have set this up in the background while I was reading. That's my bad. That's entirely on me. Guys, I think Predator is so bad. Like, I think Predator is so terrible. Walking delayed as a honey fruit really fast. Oops, I want gold. So, why would we need that power stripped out? Well, because... Oh, right! When you really see what that knock-up means, right? Like Nico knocking up when she jumps. What's the implication of that? They cannot walk out of your ultimate during the period where you can no longer move. Oh my goodness. Because if you were a Nico player, you would know the absolute agony of like being right here and someone just walks out. Right? You would know. But that's nuts. And that's actually why I believe she is primarily best as a support now. Because to lose that damage as solo kill potential does matter, but to gain it in CC consistency without losing significant basic ability damage makes you so good in the 2v2. It does enable Yasuo Nico lanes. It does. And at the same time, also remember, this makes Nico good at mid-jungle skirmishing. It means she's less likely to solo kill her opponent, but it means she's very, very good at setting up against... Or setting up for her own jungler, right? By the way, the passive looks like this. Wait, passive, hello. I'm near you. There we go.
If Nico becomes Nico, what does she look like?
I'm red buff. And look, full micro, full micro. Did you see that?
I am normal. Everything's
Full micro on the clone. You can use this to block whatever the hell you want. Like, so, that's pretty nuts, right? I mean, like, we also know it does draw aggro, right? Like, we know it. Yep. Throw out red buff, then become normal Nico? That's really funny, yeah. I mean, there's no need to, though. I mean, I am kind of slow. Wait, can I have a Nico Grove? Yeah, you can still do that trick, right? You can still do that trick. So, I don't know. I do think support Nico sounds insane with all this, right? Oh, and you still do disguise yourself, like... Okay, hold on. Can I...
Sharing memories, colors, feelings is magic. Magic connects.
I mean, let's be clear. When you're a ward, you're, like, this slow. It's agonizing. You're not catching anybody, and they all know what's going on. But, like, imagine this, right? And my favorite part about this whole thing is just... Like, look. Right? I mean, okay, I've got my movement speed. Like, once you have boots, this isn't fooling anybody, because, like, you're just faster than the rest of them, but before you have boots... And look, you can just start attacking. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me hitting this thing. I'm using my W. I can farm like this. I can just... So if you play the long con and people forget about you, you can just... How funny is that? How funny is that? Because they're going to notice when you walk in on the initial wave, but if you just continue slow pushing... Basically, I mean, the changes are obviously minor. There's just a lot of fun to be had with the passive. There's a lot of optimization to be done with the W. Like, good Nico players are going to be absolutely terrifying with this. Like, they're just going to do that. The clone's not going to get stuck in the wall anymore. It's going to go check out the bush, right? I think it doesn't last quite as long, but... Oh, are we still crashing? We're still crashing. So there's a bug on the PBE right now where every time you press reset game, it crashes the game. And then you can reconnect and the game is paused. So let's go ahead and quit out of here. Right. I just want to show you guys like one example of the clear. I'm actually going to test. I'm gonna show it to you guys, but I'm going to do so in a way that's, you know, I haven't tested yet. I haven't done a raptor start yet, but... Like, look at this. Oh, bye, small raptors. Nice knowing you. I missed it. Oh my god, I missed it. Hang on. Okay, good. Optimization of this clear will require dropping aggro with your clone, going into stealth. This one will take a little bit longer. So, I don't know if Raptor Start is actually... I mean, Raptor Start is definitely faster when you're actually, like, not griefing it. Oh, it's much faster, actually. It's much faster. And that smite was unoptimized, and... See, I can go here and save my health. For the record, I have Alacrity right now. I'm holding my Q right now. My health is too low because I've been screwing up like every part of this clear. I take second point Q because every time you do, it's plus. Like it's not just like you know, plus 45 on the initial, plus 25 on the burst. It's also plus 30 total. So like that's quite a lot. Would Nico jump? Okay, guys. Nashor's Nico is not nearly as good as you think it is. It is a funny off-meta style. I would be a full burst mage for sure. For sure, for sure, for sure. Drop the aggro so I don't take that hits. And I haven't timed this, obviously, but like you can see the clear is absolute. I don't think the clear will release on live like this. Like, again, I'm really slow, and I'm far less healthy than I should be, But watch how long it takes for the crab. Oh, the crab is spawned despite the indicator because we're technically 7 minutes into the game. That blows. No, I would be playing for Pen. Why is my pet hitting the Herald? Yeah, so Nash's Runon's based. But no, I definitely need the Q to clear. There's no reason for me to not be a Burst Mage. There's no reason for me to max W. So yeah, so that's my initial take on the Nico update. Is her jungle damage enough to early snake a dragon? At the same time as Orthodox DPS junglers, yes. So like the level 5 could work, right? As long as you're healthy enough. And obviously I wasn't healthy enough. There are optimizations to be made. I was really sloppy on that one, right? That was my first time doing Raptor Start. So yeah, TLDR, before we do the in-house and confirm, I believe Nico support looks strongest. Nico mid lane is fine, but Nico mid lane has never been like a power pick competitively. It's more of a casual thing. It's more of a thing that people like to play in solo queue, and it's good there. Nico jungle looks extremely viable, and no playstyles are destroyed, because she's lost nothing but ult damage and the immediate shield. That's the only thing she's lost that actually matters. So I love this mid-scope. That's what I like. I like it. It's really good. I have a little bit of things to do. I would like to keep working on my video tonight, and I've been asked for a little bit of my time after the stream. So, unless we have any last-second questions, I'm going to be signing off for the night. Tomorrow is my Legends of Runeterra marathon. I will be playing for at least 8 hours. Playing multiple decks in the hope of getting back to my peak rank of Diamond. That's pretty much it. Oh, and Declo is plugging the flannel Twitter, so I should do this. Guys, look at this dog shit Twitter account. Hey, we actually got some engagement. Well done, guys. Yeah, this account sucks, and you should follow it. All of the tweets are awful. Look at this. This is my favorite. This is my favorite. It's so good. Flannel Esports Entertainment Incorporated TM. The name is too long to fit everywhere. I handed the keys to Declo and to Prisma, and then also to Sonic, and then just this is what we got. So, you know, okay, Loki. One of my friend and I, we might actually be planning a day trip to Balls Falls Conservation Area. That's all. That's the last thing. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Love yourselves. Respect each other. I will see you all next time. I hope to see you tomorrow for the Runeterra Marathon, because I will need support through that, but... Alright, take it easy, guys. Good night.